A beggar had been sitting by the side of a road for over 30 years. One day, a stranger walked by. "Spare some change?" mumbled the beggar, mechanically holding out his old baseball cap. "I have nothing to give you," said the stranger. Then he asked, "What's that you are sitting on?" "Nothing," replied the beggar. "Just an old box. I have been sitting on it for as long as I can remember." "Ever looked inside?" asked the stranger. "No," said the beggar. "What's the point? There's nothing in there." "Have a look inside," insisted the stranger. The beggar managed to pry open the lid. With astonishment, disbelief, and elation, he saw that the box was filled with gold. "I am that stranger who has nothing to give you and who is telling you to look inside. Not inside any box as in the parable, but somewhere even closer, inside yourself." "But I am not a beggar," I can hear you say. "Those who have not found their true wealth, which is the radiant joy of being and the deep, unshakable peace that comes with it, are beggars, even if they have great material wealth. They are looking outside for scraps of pleasure or fulfillment, for validation, security, or love, while they have a treasure within that not only includes all those things, but is infinitely greater than anything the world can offer." The word enlightenment conjures up the idea of some superhuman accomplishment, and the ego likes to keep it that way. But it is simply your natural state of felt oneness with being. It is a state of connectedness with something immeasurable and indestructible, something that, almost paradoxically, is essentially you and yet is much greater than you. It is finding your true nature beyond name and form. The inability to feel this connectedness gives rise to the illusion of separation, from yourself and from the world around you. You then perceive yourself, consciously or unconsciously, as an isolated fragment. Fear arises, and conflict within and without becomes the norm. I love the Buddha's simple definition of enlightenment as the end of suffering. There is nothing superhuman in that, is there? Of course, as a definition, it is incomplete. It only tells you what enlightenment is not: no suffering. But what's left when there is no more suffering? The Buddha is silent on that, and his silence implies that you'll have to find out for yourself. He uses a negative definition so that the mind cannot make it into something to believe in or into a superhuman accomplishment, a goal that is impossible for you to attain. Despite this precaution, the majority of Buddhists still believe that enlightenment is for the Buddha, not for them, at least not in this lifetime. You used the word being. Can you explain what you mean by that? Being is the eternal, ever-present one life beyond the myriad forms of life that are subject to birth and death. However, being is not only beyond but also deep within every form, as its innermost invisible and indestructible essence. This means that it is accessible to you now as your own deepest self, your true nature. But don't seek to grasp it with your mind. Don't try to understand it. You can know it only when the mind is still. When you are present, when your attention is fully and intensely in the now, being can be felt, but it can never be understood mentally. To regain awareness of being and to abide in that state of feeling realization is enlightenment. When you say being, are you talking about God? If you are, then why don't you say it? The word God has become empty of meaning through thousands of years of misuse. I use it sometimes, but I do so sparingly. By misuse, I mean that people who have never even glimpsed the realm of the sacred, the infinite vastness behind that word, use it with great conviction, as if they knew what they are talking about. Or they argue against it, as if they knew what it is that they are denying. This misuse gives rise to absurd beliefs, assertions, and egoic delusions, such as, "My or our God is the only true God, and your God is false," or Nietzsche's famous statement, "God is dead." The word God has become a closed concept. The moment the word is uttered, a mental image is created, no longer perhaps of an old man with a white beard, but still a mental representation of someone or something outside you. And, yes, almost inevitably a male someone or something. Neither God nor being nor any other word can define or explain the ineffable reality behind the word. So the only important question is whether the word is a help or a hindrance in enabling you to experience that. Does it point beyond itself to that transcendental reality, or does it lend itself too easily to becoming no more than an idea in your head, a mental idol? The word being explains nothing, but nor does God. Being, however, has the advantage that it is an open concept. It does not reduce the infinite invisible to a finite entity. It is impossible to form a mental image of it. Nobody can claim exclusive possession of being. It is your very essence, and it is immediately accessible to you as the feeling of your own presence. The realization I am that is prior to I am this or I am that. So it is only a small step from the word being to the experience of being. What is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not being able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it. It is considered normal. This incessant mental noise prevents you from finding that realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind-made self that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at all that in more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." In fact, he had given expression to the most basic error, equating thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in a state of apparent separateness, in an insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict. This world reflects the ever-increasing fragmentation of the mind. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one and, therefore, at peace. At one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as with your deepest self and life unmanifested, at one with being. Enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and continuous conflict within and without, but also the end of the dreadful enslavement to incessant thinking. What an incredible liberation this is! Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that block all true relationships. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man or woman, between you and nature, and between you and God. It is this screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there is you and a totally separate other. You then forget the essential fact that, underneath the level of physical appearances and separate forms, you are one with all that is. By forget, I mean that you can no longer feel this oneness as a self-evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but you no longer know it to be true. A belief may be comforting. Only through your own experience, however, does it become liberating. Thinking has become a disease. Disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there is nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body. But when this process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have disease. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. To put it more accurately, it is not so much that you use your mind wrongly, you usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is the disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion. The instrument has taken you over. I don't quite agree. It is true that I do a lot of aimless thinking like most people, but I can still choose to use my mind to get things done and accomplish tasks. I do that all the time. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean that you use your mind. Just as dogs love to chew bones, the mind loves to get its teeth into problems. That's why it does crossword puzzles and builds atom bombs. You have no real interest in either. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean stop thinking altogether? No, I can't, except maybe for a moment or two. Then the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it, so you don't even know that you are its slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it, and so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought, that thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize that all the things that truly matter, beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. Imagine for a moment that the concept of money no longer mattered. If your bills were paid, your needs met, and the pressure to earn was lifted, what would you do with your time? Would you write stories, paint pictures, or compose music? Would you spend your days hiking through forests, playing an instrument, or studying the stars? Maybe you'd dedicate your life to helping others, building something meaningful, or simply spending time with the people you love. For many of us, these are the things that bring us joy, the things we dream about as we sit at our desks or navigate our daily routines. And yet, these pursuits are often dismissed as impractical, relegated to the realm of hobbies or fantasies. We tell ourselves that we'll follow our passions someday, after we've saved enough, achieved enough, or retired. But what's challenges this mindset? He reminds us that life is not something to be deferred. The present moment is all we truly have, and to postpone our happiness is to risk never experiencing it at all. What's often compared life to a piece of music? In music, the goal isn't to rush to the final note. It's to enjoy every moment of the melody. The joy comes from the rhythm, the harmony, the way the sounds blend together. Life, what's argued, is the same. It's not about racing toward a destination, whether that destination is wealth, success, or some imagined future where everything is perfect. It's about savoring the journey, finding beauty in the here and now. When we focus solely on earning money, life begins to feel like a race. One where we're constantly chasing the next paycheck, promotion, or financial milestone. And in that chase, we often lose sight of the very things that make life worth living. This isn't to say that money is unimportant. We all need it to meet our basic needs, to care for our families, and to navigate the world. But what's argued that money is a means, not an end. It's a tool that should serve us, not the other way around. The problem arises when money becomes the primary focus of our lives, overshadowing our passions, relationships, and sense of purpose. Many people spend decades working jobs they dislike, justifying their unhappiness with the promise of financial stability. They sacrifice their time, energy, and dreams for the sake of a paycheck, often without questioning whether the trade-off is worth it. What challenges us to think differently. He asks us to consider what we truly value and to align our lives with those values, even if it means stepping off the traditional path. One of the most radical aspects of What's philosophy is his belief that doing what you love is not only fulfilling but practical. He argued that when you follow your passions, you naturally excel at what you do. And when you excel, you create value that others are willing to pay for. The irony, what's pointed out, is that by not focusing solely on money, you may actually increase your chances of earning it. Think about the great artists, innovators, and entrepreneurs of the world. Many of them began by pursuing something they loved, not because it was lucrative but because it inspired them. Their passion fueled their creativity, and their creativity attracted opportunities. While not everyone's journey will lead to fame or fortune, the point remains. Living authentically is its own reward. Of course, pursuing your passions can feel risky, especially in a world that prizes financial security. There's a certain comfort in following the traditional path, even if it's unfulfilling. But what reminds us that security is an illusion. No amount of money can guarantee happiness, health, or freedom from life's uncertainties. True security comes from within, from our ability to adapt, to find joy in the present, and to trust in the unfolding of life. This doesn't mean abandoning responsibility or ignoring the practicalities of existence. Instead, it's about rethinking our relationship with work and money, finding a balance that allows us to meet our needs while also honoring our passions and priorities. What's also spoke about the dangers of materialism. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded with messages that equate happiness with consumption. We are told that the latest gadget, car, or designer outfit will bring us fulfillment. But this endless pursuit of more often leads to emptiness. The more we chase external possessions, the more disconnected we become from our inner selves. What's believed that true happiness comes not from what we own but from how we live. It's found in the quality of our relationships, the depth of our experiences, and the alignment of our actions